Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this first Stakeholder Advisory Committee meeting as we begin the process of doing a needs assessment for our public health, safety, and justice facility needs assessment. Thank you, first of all, for your patience because we formed this committee back in 2019. Our first meeting was scheduled to be in March of 2020, and we all know what happened then. And so 2 years later, here we are. I really want to thank everybody again for their patience and hanging in there with us and being here today. We have an exciting project. This is a concept that I think is going to be fruitful for our community as we put our heads together and figure out, what this justice project needs to look like. So if we can get a roll call and record that roll call, we will get going. So Kathy?
I'm going to go ahead and call the roll, but I've seen that some of you are here. So in the interest of time, I'll just note that you're here and you won't have to say present. So Arlene Feld is here. Is Heather Flaherty here? Harriet Markle? Is Harriet Markle here?
Yes, I'm here, and it's Markel.
Markel, thank you very much. My apologies. Brooke Waga? Chad Buttonshoen?
I'm here. Sorry.
Brooke, thank you. Chad Buttonshoen? I see Atul Deshmain is here and Cliff Langley is here. John Muchler said he wouldn't be able to attend. Deborah Hawley. Is Deborah Hawley here? Is Brell Froby here?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Brell. I see Eli Wainman and Kendra Cook are here. Kristen Hanna is not able to attend. Is Kara Mitchell here?
Yes, it's Kara Allen.
Kara Allen, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Monks. Patrick Allen, Patrick Brody Allen. Okay. David Goldman, I believe I saw.
I'm here.
Thank you. Barry Buchanan is here. Executive Sadhu or Deputy Executive Schroeder, I see is here. Councilmember Michael Lillquist is here. Is Mayor Seth Fleetwood here or Brian Heinrich?
It's Brian Heinrich. I'm here and Mayor Fleetwood will be joining us later. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies. Anthony Hilaire. Is Catrice Rodriguez here? Okay, Scott Cortice, Mayor Scott Cortice, I see you're here. Mary Lou Stewart.
I'm here.
Thank you. I believe Jack Hovenier is here. I see Stephen Gockley, Councilmember Daniel Hamill. I see Perry Mowry is here. Is Darlene Peterson here?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much. Is Chief Flo Simon here? We have Sheriff Elfo, I saw. Jackie Mitchell.
I'm here.
Thank you. Darren Smith.
Here.
Thank you, and that's everyone.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. And again, thanks for everybody for being here. So to kick us off, I'm going to introduce our facilitation team. It's Holly O'Neill and Marty Solomon from Crossroads Consulting, and we're very lucky to have them lead us through these meetings as we proceed this year. So I'm going to turn it over to Holly and take it away, please.
Great. Thank you, Barry. Okay, good to see you all. I'm sitting here thinking about the history of this project, which has been years long in the making, and that the SAC, this group was supposed to convene in person, and now here we are in this online Zoom environment. And so I'm going to start by just saying, I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad we all have computers. And you know how it works, right? Things always go funky and something goes wrong. So I just want to start by lowering your expectations. Something will technically go wrong at some point. I'm gonna bet on it, but we will manage. It's gonna be really fun, and I think you're all gonna love the layout today. So Kathy, if you could start up with the slideshow, I'm just going to walk through. And my job today with my colleague, Marty Solomon, who's, well, at least she's on my bottom left, is to just support the process and help it move along well. So here we are, we're at the first meeting of the SAC. And Kathy, I'll just say bing, or could you change slide, next slide? I'm going to start by going over the agenda, which also you got one in your email, I believe, either yesterday evening or this morning. This is slightly, I'm going to make some small changes to the agenda and also on the online version on our webpage, the website page, there are some changes too. So just to flag that. So we're going to start out, I'm going to go through some meeting procedures, participation guidelines, and how we're going to operate together in decision making. And then we have project overviews. So at this point, we're going to hear from a lot of different people. So Tyler Schroeder, our deputy executive, will go through some of the major issues we're going to be talking about. Then we'll talk about our current situation, and Prosecutor Ritchie and Sheriff Elfo will do that section. Then we have our key personnel and our roles. Council Member Buchanan is going to handle that along with the guiding principles. And those are really important just to make sure we're grounded in common assumptions about what kind of why this matters and how to think about the issues that we're about to discuss. Then the last thing we'll do is look at our phase 1 goals and our SAC process overall. And Stephen Gockley is going to handle that. So after we've heard from everybody, then we'll open the floor for Q&A. And then the last thing we'll do with our time together is just some coordination. So we need to elect the SAC chair. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how to anticipate our work together in the coming months. And then we'll wrap up. So that's our agenda for our time together. Next slide. This is, and anytime there's a pause, just take that opportunity to like take a deep breath. You can stretch if you want, you know, we'll just enjoy these extra moments together. Kathy, are you stuck? Can you flip that slide? Oh, there it is. Okay. So process support, like I said earlier, the facilitation and note taking will be handled by myself and my colleague, Marty Solomon. The county staff support is Kathy Halka, who is amazing and so well-grounded in making sure we have crossed our T's and dotted our I's with all the different processes in this meeting online. And then we have our planning team, and that's Barry Buchanan, Stephen Gockley, and Jack Hovinier. And so Marty and I help with the planning team just to make sure that we have a process and that it gets from point A to point B. Okay. Next slide. All righty, Zoom, logistics. We all know about this. So basically, as much as possible, I would invite you to keep your video on. I know if you are, live out in the county, sometimes that's hard, but I really want to encourage you to do that because it makes it more like we are together in a room. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect and be working together as a group to bring our best thinking forward. So as much as you can keep yourself with the video on, that'd be great. Keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. Remember, these are all public meetings and they'll be recorded and available online. And whenever we're in open discussion mode, it works best if you do the raise hand button to be recognized to speak. So here's a great opportunity. We're going to practice. Here we go. Bottom right of your screen, find your raise hand button. I'm going to do mine. Make sure we got that. And then lower hand. In fact, you can do it over and over and over and, really get the sense. Build your skills there. All right. So that's your raise hand button. You got it. Just like you all did successfully already, when you get onto the call, you do have to name yourself. You all did great. You're already winners. All righty. So next thing. This is just some thoughts. I'm going to share some thoughts about the guidelines for participation, and that really helps. Here, I better lower my hand. That really, I think, helps create the kind of environment that we want to be able to have really productive discussion. And again, we don't all have to agree all the time. In fact, I hope we don't. We shouldn't. We have brains here. We're here to use them. But that being said, it's really important diverse opinions are welcome, and in expressing those, that we treat others with respect, even when we disagree. I know you all know this, but important to say it again. And if I just want to say that one of my jobs as your facilitator is, if things are getting, off kilter, if feelings are coming up, I'm going to ask you to slow down, because we really do want to hold that container of civility together. People don't hear well when people are upset, and we really need to hear each other. All right, stay on topic, please, and speak to the point. Avoid repeating ideas, yours and others, that really will help us be efficient with our time. In the Zoom world, it's really challenging and super important that you stay in the room. And what that means is you want to avoid reading your email or checking your texts or playing on your video games or whatever else you're doing. Of course, some of us are going to be tuning in from home, and we got kids to take care of or whatever, but as much as possible, please stay in the room. And then lastly, you want to participate in balance with other participants. And what that means is, if you are a person who tends to be shy or quiet, I really want to encourage you to speak up. If you're a person who dominates conversation and finds yourself waxing eloquent and you know who you are, you want to think about, how can I say that in fewer words? And how can I make sure that I'm really giving space for all voices? Okay, got it? All right, next slide. Oh, you're here already. Gosh, Kathy, you're anticipating me. Excellent. So here's the concept of how we're going to work this. During the process, we're going to anticipate, because there's, how do I say this? The needs assessment, it's big. There's a lot of topics and they're interrelated. So in concept, we're going to anticipate forming subcommittees to help us develop recommendations for different parts of the needs assessment. And then the SAC will consider and vote upon those subcommittee recommendations kind of closer to the end of our process. And the recommendations that are approved will become part of the needs assessment, which then get presented to county council. So in concept, that's how it's going to work. We'll see how that goes, but this is our hope, to make sure we really get a chance for in-depth dialogue. All right, so next slide. For decision making, so when we hear these recommendations, because ideally we want to come to unity at the end of our process, we'll just do a pretty simple process. There's a motion and a second, when you have your recommendation ready, and we'll see what those look like. I don't know what they're going to look like yet, but motion, second, discussion will identify points of unity, flag issues of concern, make friendly amendments. And then, the idea is we're in a consensus seeking process, but we will be voting. We may ultimately not all agree. So if it really seems like we're not on the same page, we can, make a motion to send something back to the subcommittee. But if it looks like we're pretty darn close, we'll go ahead and I'll call the question. We'll vote on the final recommendation. Simple majority vote to pass. 12 members present are a quorum. And if there are unresolved concerns that people want to make sure get into the record, we will make sure to capture those. So ideally, we're going to be really on, coming to unity, and it's possible that there's places we won't. So we will honor those as well. Our process, in concept, we're going to try and do this in 5 meetings. We'll see how that goes. Today is really about laying a foundation. So ideally we have a similar understanding of the process in early April. Yeah, Atul, let me get through this and then I'll answer your question. I see your hand up. Thank you. In early April, we'll be looking at the criminal justice data. And then we'll just have to see how we go. So we've got behavioral health services, then we'll bring those together to talk about what facilities we need, and then start developing the needs assessment by the 5th meeting. Okay, Atul, go ahead. Question.
Thank you. My question is regarding a majority rule.
Yep.
Will we have a provision for a minority or dissenting opinion?
Yeah, that's that part I said at the end. Kathy, can you go back one slide? So unresolved concerns, same idea as a dissenting opinion, are going to be noted for the record. So when the recommendation would go through, then the dissenting opinions or unresolved concerns would be listed with that. So people would know. So council would know that these were the concerns that did not get resolved.
Okay. And that's the process that you're proposing. Okay, great.
Yep. Okay. This is actually a good time. Are there, because we're about to go into our speakers, are there any other questions?
Well, I should just say as a follow-up, another process that's used.
Hang on. It's better. I'm sorry. I've been speaking Spanish all day. Atul, can you put your video on? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another process that's used in situations like this is that a dissenting opinion can also be adopted. I'm fine with what you've proposed. I have no issue with it, but I've been part of other committees where they actually allow for a dissenting opinion. So a group of people could adopt a dissenting opinion. And I just wanted to bring it up.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
To see if anybody has interest in that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Barry, you had a thought on that or something else?
No, it's just one thing that before we moved into the actual presentations, I wanted you to go over the public comment process.
Oh,
And the email that we have set up for written comments to come in.
yep. Good. Okay, I'm about to do that. Well, I'm just going to do that now. So reminder, we're going to hear all the presenters and then we're going to do the Q&A. And for public comment, which you can make at any point in our process, we've set up an email for that. I'm going to post it on our very last slide, but I'm going to just say it out loud. Ready? So you can write it down. It'll also come to you in an email. It's SAC, S-A-C, at co.wacom.wa.us. So again, this is going to pop up on the very last slide that we're going to show today, and it'll come in an email. But if you did want to jot it down, it's SAC at co.wacom.wa.us. Okay, any other process questions before we move in to the presentations? And for those of you who are Marty, oh, good. Yeah, Kathy, is your hand up? And then Brill, I see yours.
I'd just like to add that all of the emails that come into the SAC email address will be posted online. So all the SAC members will be able to see it on the web page, what comments have come in.
Great, thank you. Brill?
That answered my question. Thank you.
Excellent. Anything else? Okay, I'm flipping back and forth. All right, what do we have next? Okay, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce each speaker. And this is Deputy Executive Schroeder. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Holly. Welcome. Thanks for having me. I've been asked to give a little background on the issues. And I've laid that out as two different themes, kind of a historical context and recent developments. So again, for those that know me, hello, and those that don't, I'm Tyler Schroeder. I'm the Deputy Executive for Whatcom County. I've worked in the executive's office for 6 or 7 years now for Whatcom County, just about 20 years. And am excited about engaging this committee and providing some background and information on the project and see where it goes. So the first slide that I have on the project overview is for some historical context. So a lot of you will know some of this information, but I think it's good that we start on a baseline. And then the next 2 slides after that will be on recent developments. So the current jail was opened in the early 1980s. And I would say in the early 1990s, questions about adequacy and safety of the current facility started to arise. In 1997, there was a sales tax measure for juvenile detention facilities and a jail facility that did not pass from the constituents of Whatcom County. In 2000, around 2000, early 2000, the Law and Justice Council recommended a construction of a new jail again. Voters approved the sales tax measure in 2004. And in a few years after that, in 2006 or 7, a contract was awarded and the 150-bed minimum security work center on Division Street was constructed. After that, subsequent to that, Whatcom County purchased the Bounty Road property near Ferndale in 2014, as there was still dialogue about replacing the existing downtown facility with a new facility. In 2015 and 17, both years, there were sales tax measures to fund the construction of a new jail facility at LaBounty Road. And as a lot of us know, both of those measures failed from the constituents of Whatcom County. So that's a little historical background on some steps that have been talking about replacing the downtown jail. And now I'll turn to some recent developments. So as the sales tax measures failed in 2015 and 2017, kind of a parallel process started, and the community reached out to the county council and asked to start talking more specifically on incarceration prevention and reduction. And so in 2015, the task force, the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force, was formed. In 2018, there was a listening series that was conducted across Whatcom County to share information, input, and ideas for improving the Whatcom County's criminal justice system. In 2019, more than $9 million was required to repair and maintain, as well as provide some life and safety issues on the existing jail. Back then, Executive Sadhu was a council member, and I think I remember him saying it's good money after bad. In 2019, it was recognized that the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force would also serve as the Law and Justice Council. Holly, would you like me to take questions now?
No, we're not taking questions now. So folks, if you have questions, just jot them down, and then we're going to hear all the presentations, and then we'll take questions at the end. So go ahead.
Great,
Tyler.
thank you. So as a baseline foundation for what I would consider to be the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, in 2019, the County Council adopted a statement of public health, safety, and justice facility planning principles. In 2019 and 20, the council established and appointed members to this committee, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. And overall was to solicit and collect community input during a needs assessment process. And as we all know, because we probably started just the beginning of that, the convening of the SAC was postponed due to COVID. Between 2020 and 2022, it's been recognized that the pandemic has really exacerbated a lot of the existing limitations and safety issues at the current facility. Lacking adequate medical space, negative pressure, ventilation, and other issues have arisen and been shown to be exacerbated. One of the large items for the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force is to work towards the construction and opening of the Crisis Stabilization Center. So in 2021, the Crisis Stabilization Center near the existing Alternative Work Center at Division Street has been opened, and that has increased our mental health and chemical dependency capacity by 32 beds. So through this, really, I was just asked to be able to provide kind of a historical context and some recent developments to be able to provide that framework for where we'll be moving into the next steps as the Stakeholder Advisory Committee.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Okay, so now we're going to do a little overview of the project, and Prosecutor Richie, you're up. And Atul, you can set your hand down because then put it back up if you want, just because it's right there on the screen. Okay, Prosecutor Richie, you're up.
Great, thank you all for having me. I've been asked to talk about how I see incarceration needs within Whatcom County. I'll tell you that these are just things that I see from my perspective. I think Sheriff Bill Elfo will have a lot more information about statistics and what's really going on in the jail. I see what happens before people get to jail, and you know, and I guess I also have some other information that I will be providing to you about how that all goes. So to start this conversation, I think that we should talk about, or we should at least be concerned with how people are incarcerated. And I'll start with saying that we should provide humane conditions, safe conditions for inmates and staff alike. We need to better promote the health and well-being of all. Our current facility is in pretty rough condition. And I'll tell you, I hear from defendants that they would rather plead guilty to more serious crimes than go to prison than be housed in our Whatcom County Jail. Whatcom County is growing rapidly and expected to continue to expand. With increased population comes more crime. We've noticed increased violent crime and increased recidivism, especially in property crimes. There are more pending murder cases at this time than ever before, and people charged with murder tend to be held for longer periods of time in pre-trial situations in our jail, you know, waiting for trial these days. And that's, the jail really isn't designed for long-term care like that. But with all that, Whatcom County's needs to incarcerate have changed over the years. The goal at this point is to incarcerate as few people as possible while keeping our community safe. And with all of that, I also have to tell you, you need to know that we have dangerous individuals that need to be held, and they need to be held to protect the rest of us. We have a duty to protect our community from all crime, and that means incarcerating people for committing property crimes too. There have been some recent law and policy changes that have reduced incarceration rates and some situations that have caused some individuals to stay in our jail longer than they should. And we're going to talk about that. The biggest impact to our jail and law enforcement has been the Blake decision. I think most of you have heard about Blake. Blake was the Supreme Court decision that abolished the crime of unlawful possession of hard drugs. We didn't incarcerate a lot of people directly for simple possession prior to Blake, but a felony conviction for possession increased sentences for other crimes. All sentences are scored by criminal history, and where there's more history a person has, the longer a sentence will be. Abolishing possession charges reduced criminal history, which reduces sentences for other crimes. And all of that has resulted in fewer bed days in jail for all crimes. But an unintended consequence of abolishing unlawful possession has been that we cannot encourage people to get treatment as we once did. Encouraging treatment is part coercion, and without felony possession, we have no teeth to encourage treatment for a lot of people. I want to mention driving while suspended in third degree. We no longer charge driving while suspended in the third degree as a standalone crime. This reduces the number of bed days in our jail. A person loses their license to become suspended in the third for things that are not associated with traffic safety. And once people are suspended, people often can't afford to reinstate their license. I don't know what it's going to take to help people get relicensed, but adding barriers of incarceration, fines, and fees is not the answer. I have to talk about COVID. COVID has really impacted what we do around here. Never in my 28 years of prosecuting have I ever seen courts shut down. And that's what we've had. We've had courts shut down for long periods of time. To be safe, we must social distance, and that's why the courts have shut down. But also to be safe within our jail, the sheriff has set booking restrictions, and that's required to have social distancing. The jail is just not set up to keep people separated in a safe manner at this time. And of course, I support these ideas because we need to keep everyone safe, including people who are charged with crimes. But the result has been a case backlog because people need incentives to resolve cases. And incentive is often incarceration or fear of incarceration by trial. Having no trials for a long period of time has resulted in reduced resolutions, and in some cases, people languishing in the jail, and that's unfortunate. Some of the people stuck in the jail are those who need mental health restoration treatment from the state of Washington. The state has poured quite a few resources into restoration services, but lengthy delays persist. I believe that our state needs more treatment facilities for restoration as well as other things, and I hope that that's going to be talked about because a lot of these issues are really entwined with public health. On a more positive note, there is a new emphasis on treatment programs. Some of these that I'm going to mention are older and some of them are new. They're all working well, and they're designed to help people and reduce recidivism, which reduces jail bed days. First one I want to mention is drug court. It's tried and true. Virtually every county in the state has a drug court system. It's a carrot and boy, where was I?
Stick.
Thank you. I knew there's an S in there. Carrot and stick.
Got it. There you go.
Thank you. Carrot and stick system that's designed to get people treatment and encourage treatment. And it's been so effective that it is been copied or duplicated in a way by our state legislature through a program called DOSA, which is Drug Offender Sentencing Alternative. It's, I also want to mention, along with drug court, there's mental health court. And mental health court is kind of a similar program. It's also a carrot and stick model, and that's to encourage treatment for mental health. The program diverts people away from the criminal justice system when they have mental health issues as well. And, while we can't get everyone into this program who has mental health and criminal issues, this mental health court has grown exponentially over this last year. We're seeing a big increase in that program. Residential DOSA, I mentioned that earlier as a legislative copy of drug court, and it's not quite that, but DOSAs are often preferred programs by defendants. The program is run by the Department of Corrections and require engagement and treatment with the same carrot and stick treatment plan. Grace is something that both the county and city put together. It's really working well. It's ground level response and coordinated engagement. It's a voluntary program for people to engage in. It provides wraparound services to high utilizers of the ER and EMS. It has also been found to significantly reduce criminal recidivism for all those involved in Grace. The numbers are really impressive, and I think you all should look more into that if you're interested. LEAD is Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. This is the program that my office started. This program also provides wraparound services very similar to Grace. We provide them to people who are committing low-level crimes. We expect that we will have the same numbers of recidivism reduction that Grace has achieved. LEAD has recently expanded from a social contact model, offering services, to now actually diverting people from the criminal justice system. And we're really excited about the program's potential. Most of what I've told you about are programs, laws, and policies that reduce bed days in our jail. And I'll tell you, the data is difficult to acquire, but Sheriff Elfo will have some more numbers for you. The message that I really want you to go away with as we talk about building a new facility is that we need treatment beds. We need places where we can help people get on a better track. A jail should not be a place where we just house our mentally ill. Criminal justice is often about public health, and I think we can provide more for our community. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Sheriff Elfo.
Hi, let me get my video on.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Bill Elfo. I've been the Whatcom County Sheriff since 2003, so just over 19 years. And during that entire time, we've struggled with the adequacy of the jail. I know a lot. I've attended and I've heard all the various consultants that the county has hired since that time, and actually before that in the 1990s. I've sat through all the listening sessions. I've heard all the recommendations, and I'd just like to provide some context. Number one is the sheriff has an obligation to operate the jail in a safe, legal, and constitutional manner and comply with all the laws of the state with regard to sentencing and court decisions of the judges as to who we hold in jail. So I do hold the keys to the jail, but the sheriff's office and the prosecutor's office do not decide how long somebody's going to be in jail. Those are decisions for the courts in conjunction with the various sentencing laws and rules that apply. And there are many failures in this jail as to its adequacy in terms of space for treatment, mental health treatment, detox, medical isolation, and just space where we could offer education and training. We are very, very limited. And hopefully as part of this process, you'll be able to get a tour of the facility and see firsthand what we're doing. But there's a multitude of factors that influence jail space needs. And some are beyond our control, what we would individually like to see, and they reflect the laws and policies of numerous criminal justice entities, mental health service providers, and others. And we do have a revolving door at the jail at the current time with people being booked, being released, being rearrested, and rebooked. We see this more frequently now than ever with our needs to artificially control the jail population. So again, regardless of what we think, we have to pay attention to all the factors that are required by the law and be attuned to potential new court legislation, court decisions, judicial discretion, especially as they apply to bail and sentencing. To give you an example of some of the impacts we've seen as a booking restrictions, which I'll talk about in a second. In 2018, we had 7,281 people booked into the Whatcom County Jail. In 2019, that number was similar. It went down a little bit to 7,208. And in 2020, it was down to 3,393. So less than half. And those are a result of booking restrictions. And these are the restrictions that are placed on law enforcement and the courts now from booking someone into the facility or ordering that they serve sentences. And they've seriously restricted our ability to take people into custody for even felony crimes. It's misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors are off the table now. We don't book except in the case of DUI or domestic violence. And even then they're churned out pretty quickly. But that really frustrates the misdemeanor courts, the municipal courts, and the other courts of limited jurisdiction, the district court, in able to carry out their sentencing. An unintended consequences has been with the courts, the district courts and the city courts sometimes sentence people to jail and they can't serve their sentences. So they kind of ride out and they can't get on with their life because they have a sentence to serve and they can't serve it. So we're back to where we were before the opening of the work center, or probably worse. But I got to say too, not booking restrictions and not taking someone into custody when there's an arrest warrant for them is a fiction that we created. A warrant is a command to the law enforcement officer to take someone into custody. It's not a suggestion that we do so. So we're paying, in my perspective, out of necessity, but we're playing kind of loose with what the law requires. And we are a nation of laws. Public health issues that That is a very serious issue in the jail. We don't have space for adequate distancing, particularly in terms of COVID. We have no areas that would serve as in what the vernacular calls negative pressure areas, where people with airborne diseases can be isolated to prevent the spread of the disease throughout the facility. The air recirculates, and while the county facilities department has taken some really good efforts to make sure that the air is run through multiple filters, it's a big risk. And while the courts close and others can separate themselves from inmates that come in with COVID, our staff is exposed to that all the time. The contract nurses and others that work within the jail facility have contracted COVID from these exposures. So that is a serious situation that has not been addressed in previous plans for a new jail. They included, before anyone ever heard of COVID, space for isolation with airborne diseases. When you can imagine when you have people in close proximity to one another where that's an issue. Judicial release and bail decisions, sentencing decisions, they've also been affected by COVID. In the case of sex offenders, they're required to be taken into custody immediately upon a guilty verdict. So they are held in the facility and with no bail pending their sentencing. And this sometimes could take a long time. The Department of Corrections does a pre-sentence investigation. This sometimes takes months and ties up the limited space that we have for people that are going to be most likely routed to prison at the end. The suspension of trials has had an impact on us. As I said, our folks continue to work in the facility while the courts are closed. At this point, they're not planning to reopen until February 14th, and there's been several closures since the advent of COVID. At the same time, we've seen a significant reduction in plea agreements, a process which clears about 90% of the cases for individuals held in custody. As of yesterday, Chief Jones reports that there are 14 people in custody longer than a year, another 37 held for 6 months or longer, and the average length of stay in all in 2021 has grown from 7 days last year to 18 days today. We've seen also increase in a number of offenders with serious mental illness. It's grown significantly, and there are a number of factors which have influenced that. Check of our population as of January 13th showed that 48 of the people housed in the jail carried a classification as having serious mental illness. Most have co-occurring substance abuse disorders. The ability of the treatment providers, including the hospital and stabilization, to refuse or treat people acting in a way that may be harmful to others or their other clients. So it places limitations what they could do. There's a lack of secure space that are not within the jail to house individuals who appear to be a threat to other community members. And I know there's a plan to try to change this in the future. At the new Crisis Stabilization Center, we can't take involuntary commitments, people who present a grave danger to themselves or others and are going to be held without their will. That creates an issue. For individuals whose legal competency is at issue, or they meet the legal, or their defense is saying that they meet the legal definition of insanity, requires an evaluation and a restoration of competency. They're two different processes, but they're similar. That takes about a 12 to 18 week wait for a bed at one of our state hospitals. And as the prosecutor mentioned, the facilities that they have, the state and resources are woefully inadequate. Even if the state hospitals prescribe medications to restore competency, the jails are unable to compel the people to take the medicine. So we can't force like the hospital does for them to be medicated. So this frequently results in another trip and another start over of the 12 to 18-week process. And I got to say, as Wendy Jones, our chief of corrections, who's been here for over 40 years, that the conditions in the jail, without doubt, compound people's mental health status. We have a really dedicated crew of people that work up there that care. They're very professional, but the facility itself is so lacking, and there's so many things that could be done within the we see done in modern facilities that we're unable to do here. Bail amounts widely vary, and that could appear to have little connection to the underlying offenses. Random check of people who were booked on January 10th through the 12th shows bails of $250 for manufacturing controlled substances, $4,000 and $2,000 for trespassing misdemeanor charges, a $10,000 cash bail for DUI, and a $1,000 bond for robbery first, and a $1,000 bond for not having a valid driver's license. So we serve 10 different court systems. We serve the 2 tribal courts, all of the municipal courts, the district court, the superior court. They add up to 10, and the individual judges all have their own discretion. Our prosecuting attorney, Eric, mentioned the Blake decision, and now the statutes on possession of controlled substances have been downgraded to simple misdemeanor offenses, which we don't book people in. And we, under the current law, we don't refer people to the prosecutor unless they've had 2 referrals for mental health, or I'm sorry, substance abuse treatment, not mental health. So that creates challenges when there's inadequate treatment available. And what we do is, and all the agencies are doing, is simply providing the people with a phone number. If you want help, you can call this number and someone will try to help you at some time. So it's not really adequate. The Blake decision was decided in the first quarter of 2021. Since then, we compared 2020 to 2021, and first quarter drug possession charges were down 77 to 35. The second quarter, after the decision took effect for the whole time, it was down from 43 in 2020 to 3 in 2021. The third quarter of 2021, we went from 63 to 16. And the fourth quarter, 95 to 11. So the number of people in there on drug charges has dropped dramatically. But we see the legislature, there's several bills pending, and I support some of them. I support treatment over incarceration wherever possible. But sometimes we can't get people into drug court or drug treatment unless they go to jail. Some people do not want it unless there's some compelling carrot and a stick, as was described by prosecutor Ritchie. Other programs that or other things that we're doing to try to control the jail population is we have a mental health deputy program, and we currently have 2 deputies that respond. That all our deputies have training now on crisis intervention and to deal with people with mental health, and try to exploit to the extent possible mental health alternatives over the criminal justice system in jail. And for the more difficult chronic repeat cases, we have 2 deputies, and that's all they do, work as mental health deputies and respond to people in crisis. And we've also, in the process, I think, getting people hired through the health department has been a bit of a delay, but they're working on improving that. I think they're going to be successful, of having mental health specialists that will actually ride with the deputies and be able to provide some professional services. Several years ago, we had a big issue with opiate drugs, and we continue to do so. And we have medically assisted treatment to help people get from withdrawal in the jail. So if we can't get them in there, we can't get them into those programs. And I wanted to, I mentioned Wendy Jones, Chief Corrections Officer, or Chief Corrections Deputy. It's been here for so many years. She is really the guru on the jail. She knows what goes on there. So I'm going to just, if I could take the liberty, if she sees something significant that I failed to miss, I wouldn't want to give her the opportunity. I wouldn't want to miss it because she's full of wisdom.
Great. Chief Jones, would you like to speak?
Just one thing, to let the folks on the committee know about the MAP program. We've been pretty stable at about 15 or 16 offenders on the program because of the way it was structured. As of the first of the year, we got a new provider that is a good general practitioner, but also has certification and licensure as an addiction medicine. That number has increased to 36 people in about a week and a half. And that's presenting some other challenges, but it really does speak to a lot of the issues of folks who are coming into jail. The sheriff pointed out that people coming in on drug charges have reduced, but people coming in on drugs have increased significantly. And the two drugs of choice that we're seeing now are fentanyl, not so much heroin, and definitely methamphetamines. And in fact, some recent statistics that we've let our crew know about that are working custody side is that the leading cause of drug overdoses in the state of Washington is methamphetamine, not opioids. But the big reason for that is there is a medication you can give someone who has overdosed for the opioids and it will prevent them from passing away. Well, we don't have that same option with meth. And so it's a growing problem. It always has been a large one, but getting the resources and things lined up to be able to expand that program and then getting them hooked into services in the community. That has been an issue with all of the treatment programs we run. The last thing I'd like to mention is that a lot of folks don't realize that neither the downtown jail or the work center have any space that is ADA compliant. At this point, we've been given a great deal of grace from the entities that supervise that because we've been able to come up with some creative alternatives, but it is increasingly becoming an issue. So with that, I suspect people will have questions and want information. That's one of the reasons I'm taking notes so that we can make that available to them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sheriff Elfo, and thank you, Chief Jones. That was really a lot of information. And I'm struck by a couple things. One is that, you gave us a lot of numbers, and I think that's important too, because one of the things about the needs assessment that we're looking at is, how big and what kinds of facilities we need. So for everybody, if you were starting to get overwhelmed by the numbers, just remember Marty takes excellent notes. Those are going to be online as well as the videos. You can go back. You don't have to jot it all down or worry, but those are important considerations. So to all of my presenters who are still to come, which I think is Barry and Stephen, just to remind you, we're running a little over on time. Okay. So Barry, I'm going to turn it over to you now for the project overview.
Okay, thanks, Holly. Yes, that's a lot of information to take in. And it just shows how much work has gone into incarceration prevention and really thinking along those lines of treatment over punishment that we've all adapted and really got our thinking towards. So after the Incarceration Prevention Task Force was formed, one of the next things that happened was the council formed a Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee as a standing committee to really focus a lot more energy on these criminal justice issues. So we went through a lot of planning, and what we did is we started forming teams to help put this, what is ultimately this infrastructure that we're laying out for you today. So kind of the first step was the senior elected folks in the county, the sheriff, the executive's office, the council, and the prosecutor's office started talking about how we get into a needs assessment process and involving the public extensively. The listening tour that Deputy Executive Schroeder talked about was key in informing us of how the community felt about treatment over punishment, and that became a real guiding principle for us. And as we get into the next piece, you'll see how that plays out. But anyway, the planning team that was developed because the two chairs of the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force, which is Stephen Gockley and Jack Ovenier, and then myself as the chair of the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force Steering Committee, it seemed very logical to have us be kind of the planning team along with our consultants and some of the staff. So we are the ones that are responsible, good or bad, for planning this meeting. And just to give you kind of a flavor of the layers of involvement for the different groups in the county, the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force has shown over and over and over again throughout the years that it has the expertise, the ideals, and the commitment to really take a lot of these ideas that come forward about diversion and treatment and really form them into actionable ideas. So we thought, as the leadership team, that it was important to include them as a full partner in this initiative of this needs assessment. So the steering committee is acting as kind of the direction and the policy. We have an agenda item each month regarding this project on our Incarceration Prevention Task Force Steering Committee agenda. And we use then the subcommittee structure of the task force to be able to accomplish some of the detailed work that will take place during this needs assessment. So the task force itself has representation from all the jurisdictions, all the service providers in the justice and behavioral health, and citizen input as well. So the next step was to look at how we approach this project for a needs assessment. And we thought the importance of having the community involved and all of the providers and all of the different entities throughout all of our jurisdictions at the table for this discussion was key and very important. So in 2019, we formed the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for this project. And so it's, key county staff and elected officials from both the county and the city and the small cities. We have all of our partner agencies and a diverse amount of representatives from the public that have been appointed by the council. Next slide, please. So this graphic kind of shows the relationship between the different agencies and committees. Notice the public is at the bottom. That doesn't mean it's at the bottom. This is not a top-down chart. This is an all-inclusive information flow type of a chart. So the public is just as much a partner in this as any of us are today. So this kind of shows you, who's involved in these different teams. It shows one in the middle is consultant teams. This is kind of the pool that we'll draw from as we move along and find that we have needs for more explicit data. Like one of our consultant teams is our facilitation, and we have a RFP out now for a communications plan and a public engagement plan. Data summary and gaps, we've engaged Dr. Alexis Harris from the University of Washington to help us understand some criminal justice data. She will be leading the discussion on our meeting 2 when it comes to criminal justice data. And then, of course, and when we get into facility design and cost and financing, we will engage other professional third parties as we need to. Then, of course, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, that's all of us here today. We are the important ones that are providing these recommendations back to the council after we complete our process. And then ongoing is the public, and that communications plan that will be developed right away as soon as we get this consultant on board. Will be looking at ways to really keep the public engaged, because that's so important. And it was such a missing element in our first two efforts in 2015 and 17. Next slide, please. So guiding principles. Whatcom County has joined the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or the GARE. It's a project that has a kind of a toolkit that keeps your lens always focused on racial equity. And Stephen will be going over that a little bit in more detail on the next section. Then in 2019, we adopted this public health, safety, and justice facility planning principles. So this was a culmination of a lot of the things that you've heard other speakers talk about today, such as diversion programs and mental health court, and all the different projects that we brought forward over the years to reduce our jail population and to have just a much more focus on treatment rather than punishment. So shared public jail facility with integrated behavioral health services. That's so important because behavioral health is at the intersection of so many of the issues we have today. We have a stewardship of funds, public safety, and behavioral health services, so we can coordinate our efforts. Once we resource this kind of a project, we can resource it in a way that really is meaningful. It's not just building a facility that's for corrections, because it's also looking at what the needs we have for additional behavioral health services in order to improve our criminal justice system. A lot of the reports that we get, the annual reports that come out twice a year from the task force that go to the council, do provide specific recommendations as they come up throughout the year for the task force. We want to commit funding towards community-based preventive services and post-release support. That's very important. Post-release is something that we're probably a little weak on, and we need to have that reentry system looked at and bolstered. We continue to look towards behavioral health facilities as alternatives. I think that goes without saying that everyone recognizes that behavioral health is such an important element in this discussion we're having. Next slide, please. So data has been an important part of our discussion. Councilmember Hamill and I both were involved in a MacArthur project, MacArthur grant, where we traveled around the country and we talked about a lot of these issues we're talking about today. And the one thing we found in common with many jurisdictions throughout the country is data, and understanding it, being able to get it, being able to coordinate it. So we formed an index committee to help us with that. Index is, boy, I don't remember the acronym at this point, but it's a data coordination committee that helps us understand that. This is an important one. The size of whatever facility that we deem necessary after our needs assessment needs to be based on our programs and our policies, not just a straight formula of population projections. It is formulatic, but it's formula based, but it's a very complicated formula that we have to take into consideration what these programs are doing to help reduce our population in the jail. The location needs to be best for all partners. We had talked about reanalyzing the downtown Bellingham location, but we also have an opportunity at the Iron Gate facility, where we have the minimum security facility, which is Sheriff Elfo referred to as the work center. Then we also have the crisis stabilization facility out at the same location. And the county has purchased an additional somewhere over 3 acres at the same spot. So there is some opportunity there to have a campus-oriented facility if we choose to go in that direction. Apportion construction and operating costs separately among jail users. That's kind of at the end of the process where we come to all the financial agreements between the city of Bellingham, small cities, and everyone, the tribes, everyone involved as users. Next slide, please. Going to continue to work on reducing the bail and probation procedures. Hire a behavioral health criminal justice planner to evaluate additional aspects. That's part of that whole consultant team circle that was on that graphic as I went over previously. And then eventually we were looking at some sort of a funding proposal on the ballot to fund our justice system improvements. We commit to a transparent planning process with opportunities for community input. That's what today is all about, to kick that process off, to make sure that there is that transparency and ability for the public to watch these meetings that are being recorded and other projects for communication as our consultant deems. Next slide. This has been kind of the schematic or block diagram that the Incarceration Prevention Task Force has worked with over the years. It was developed by Policy Research Associates. We use it for a lot of things. This is just it in its simplest form. Councilmember Hamill and Mr. Gockley have often talked about how intercept 0, we need to have an intercept -1 and a -2 and so on for our prevention. And I totally agree with that concept. But I think just laying this simple piece out right now is sufficient. It just shows the different spots where we can intervene in the process, whether it's community service prior to any law enforcement engagement and so on. And what we've done for the task force is we broke this down. We have to update it, but we have a lot of the programs that support folks in these different intercept spots. And it's very, very valuable. We'll include that probably in the near future in one of these graphics that we present to you once we make sure it's updated and current. So, but it's really good. It talks about programs that are in existence and funded, projects that are needed but not funded, and projects that really are being looked at in terms of whether we should move forward for development. Next slide. This will be Stephen, but I just kind of wanted to preface this with when we're talking about phase 1, just so you know what we're talking about, the overall project that the council initiated has 3 phases to it. Our committee here today will be working on that phase 1 piece, which is the needs assessment. And the phases 2 and 3, phase 2 is we will be taking the data that comes out of the needs assessment from this phase 1 effort and looking how that looks in an architectural form and detailed facility planning. And then phase 3 is when we get into those financial agreements and the things we have to do to fund whatever project that we decide our needs assessment points to. So with that, I will wrap up and turn it back to Holly.
Great. Thank you, Barry. That was terrific. Okay, Stephen, you're up. You ready?
Yes. Thanks, Holly. I will say, as one of the people who often talks too much in a meeting, that one of the most effective remedies for that, with Holly's caution, is to go last in the presentations, because then you have less time that you have to fill up. So I want to acknowledge that everybody who's provided information so far is a really active and central part of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force and the work that's gone on in that forum and related ones since late 2015. There's a lot of time, a lot of expertise that we have under our belt here locally. We're acknowledged statewide as sort of on the leading edge of some of the criminal legal reform efforts that really are occurring all across the country. And so one of the things I wanted to start with, now that we're down to actually the phases of the Justice Project process, is to encourage us to continue using some of the analytical tools and the decision-making resources that the task force has employed And those start in our originating ordinance that the county council passed. And that is, it calls on us to follow evidence-based practices, to search out and try to replicate best practices when those are determined based on trial and error in other jurisdictions. And while there may not be widely accepted best practices, there often are promising practices. And so we're not making this up necessarily out of our own heads. We're following the data as much as we can. We're following other experience and the recommendations that knowledgeable professionals provide us. One of the tools of that was, as Barry showed in the chart just a moment ago, the sequential intercept model. What you saw was sort of the structural part of that and the stages in this system. But as he referenced, really what the task force has been using is a localized version of that, where we have listed the programs that we have, the programs that we sort of have but need more of, and programs that we know we need but haven't yet implemented. So I agree with Councilmember Buchanan's suggestion that we need to provide you that localized version of the sequential intercept model to inform some of our discussions in continuing meetings. And lastly, I'll just underscore his mention. The task force itself was really the catalyst for engagement with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. We committed ourselves to the racial equity toolkit that organization developed. And I hope that's in the list of resources that either you have or we will provide you. And that can really be distilled down. I think it's pages 6 and 7, a list of 6 or 7 analytical questions for every policy decision that we make that drives us back to the data, that calls on us to look at the pros and cons for impacted minorities, and just make sure that equity is a consideration that we're always explicitly referencing in the decisions that we made. Next slide, thank you. So the other important thing for this phase 1 needs assessment process is to build on our prior efforts. The jail ballot initiatives that Deputy Executive Schroeder and Councilmember Buchanan referenced, as well as the follow-up community listening sessions, really told us 2 things. One is that we want to have as small a jail as possible. There's a common acknowledgement, a consensus in the community that there are an irreducible number of people who do need to be incarcerated, but we've been incarcerating too many people in the community's views, and more people need treatment for underlying conditions that have otherwise led them to be left in jail for lack of alternatives. We have heard that those alternatives need to be expanded or built if they haven't existed, and that's part of the work of the task force, and it is part of the work of us as this advisory committee. And then I'll just reinforce the work of the task force itself. We have drawn on a considerable amount of expertise, beginning with employing the National Criminal Justice Reform Consultants, the Vera Institute out of New York City, who studied our system and provided a lot of really useful information that has guided some of our work. For instance, they noted for us that back in 2018, 60% of the jail population was pre-trial. They had not been convicted or anything, and yet they were residing in the jail, mostly because the only recourse they had was to make bail, and most of them did not have the economic resources to make bail, and therefore they remained for months, sometimes in the jail, awaiting trial, when they could perhaps safely and without community risk be released to the community to await trial outside of incarceration. We've also brought in the National Association of Drug Court Professionals to survey our practices in drug court. They made a number of recommendations for improvements. We've worked with the State Office of the Administrator of the Courts on pretrial processes. The task force was one of the catalysts for starting the GRACE program and worked hand in hand with the health department developing that. And then again, as the lead program has been built up. And in response to the data from the Vera Institute, we've been working with the Superior Court to provide pretrial risk assessment and pretrial support services and monitoring so that we don't have to hold people in jail awaiting trial. And all of this has been stymied by COVID, of course, and the disruptions that has imposed throughout the process. But there are building blocks in place and more in sight that can help us achieve some of the diversion and treatment goals that we've identified. Next slide, please. At the same time that we build on work that we've done, we need to consider that there are a number of complicating, confounding factors that we have also run up against as we've studied and tried to implement some of these measures. One of the principal ones across the system is that we have outdated data systems, some of which are now in the process of being updated, but are still being done sort of agency by agency. The prosecutor's office is developing new software programs for their data, but it's their system. The public defender is doing the same. The sheriff's office has its own system. The courts are updating systems. So integration of those systems and the compilation of the comprehensive kind of data we need, the accessibility of that data to each other and the exchange of data are all hurdles that we're still struggling with, but are at the forefront to really making this a data-driven kind of reform process. We also recognize that while we have a number, and you'll see this in the sequential intercept model chart we'll provide down the road, while there are a lot of services provided, they don't fully acknowledge the need for a continuum of services and a continuum of interventions so that we may have something here, but the next thing is over here, and we can't bridge, we can't walk people from one of those sets of services to the other very well. So I'll encourage us as we talk about these to keep an eye on what continuum is necessary. We're working with not very functional systems. The behavioral health system for decades has been acknowledged to be underfunded and too compartmentalized. If you try to weld the behavioral health system with the criminal justice system, those crosswalks have not always been effectively connected. So those cause us innumerable problems when we're trying to serve the individuals who need these services. Prosecutor Ritchie and Sheriff Elfo have done a really good job of talking about the complications that recent legislative enactments and judicial decisions have thrown in our way. Two of the problems that we are really struggling with right now are the inadequate capacity of the program. It's one thing to say we don't want to incarcerate people, we want to divert them to treatment and other supports, but the capacity of those treatments, programs, and supports is really not adequate to do that right at the moment. So we need to build out systems that don't have the capacity right now to do all that we want. And part of building those systems out is that we are running into extraordinary workforce problems, especially in the behavioral health system and in the substance use treatment system. So we need to confront those, or at least consider the impacts that those have for our planning process. And part and parcel of the capacity and workforce issues are the way we have funded behavioral health and substance use treatment systems, the adequacy of financial resources. A lot of these are beyond local problems. They are state and really even national problems with Medicaid funding. So those are all factors that we're going to need to address as we walk through the phase 1 goals. So with all those factors, we're going to start with looking at a survey of the criminal legal system, from law enforcement through courts and reentry systems. We'll start that with meeting 2. That will be the skeleton of some of this work. And when we call this a needs assessment phase, I think Councilmember Buchanan has elsewhere called it needs assessment and gap analysis. So that goes back to that continuum of services that I mentioned just a moment ago. We're looking for where those gaps are and how we can fill those gaps to make the services we want most effective. So we need to survey what programs we have. We need to understand who is in those systems right now or who could be in those systems and what their characteristics are that will help us shape appropriate programs. We need to know who has to be in that system and who doesn't have to be in that system and could be redirected into more effective interventions. And then we need to know, are the complexity of needs that we have actually being met? And those are individual, the people who are in the jail or the people who are in the treatment systems, the community as a whole with its safety needs prioritized, but also its preference for not paying top dollar for incarceration when we can pay less and be more effective in treating people with their needs. And then the institutional needs for the safety of jail personnel, for example, as Chief Jones and Sheriff Elfo have articulated, and the court's needs as well for effectively processing the cases that come before them. And if we are not meeting those needs, what programs do we need? Those will be questions that we'll ask. All of these needs assessment and gap analysis discussions will help build a foundation for this work. So that will be meeting 2, starting with understanding the criminal legal system. Then we'll move to surveying what I call the basic needs, the support systems and the treatment services, which for shorthand, we're calling the behavioral health systems, but really it involves reentry, case management, supported housing. Because for example, we've realized that drug court needed some stable housing to make the treatment program drug court participants were involved in more effective. So with the task force's impetus, we've developed the recovery house on Girard Street that is just opening now. That comes directly out of task force work. Again, same kind of questions for the behavioral health systems. What programs do we have? Who's in there? Who has to be in there and who doesn't? And what programs do we need to meet needs that we're not addressing? So meeting 2 will be looking at the criminal legal system. Meeting 3 will be looking at the behavioral health system. And then we'll synthesize that information. That will be phase 1. And you'll see that mirrors the process that we've built with the sequence of meetings going through. As Holly said, hopefully we'll be able to do this in 5 meetings, maybe not. We'll see where we get with that. But we look forward to getting our teeth into the real materials next meeting and meeting 2 where we'll have Dr. Alexis Harris from the University of Washington work with us on some of the data that we have and some of the data we don't have, some of the models that are out there for working with the criminal legal system and reforms that we might make there. So back to you, Holly.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just amazed by all of the information that was just shared. And I want to start by thanking the presenters because this is a really complicated conversation and you all did an amazing job of bringing forward your best thinking to what the SAC needs to know. So thank you. Thank you for taking all that time. Really, really appreciate it. I know it takes a lot of time to put those presentations together. Yay. Okay, so we're going to move into some Q&A. We've got about 20 minutes. If we don't get through everything, before we end, I'll say again what that email is. You can send them on the email too, and we can try and do some stuff behind or between meetings. Again, we want to, yes, I see your hand up. Good job. Atul again right up there. And we want to make sure to just get as many people's questions answered today as we can. So Atul, go ahead, please.
First, I want to say that lots of questions came up, and out of respect for everybody else here, I want to make sure that I don't suck up all the oxygen in the Q&A period.
How about if you do, can I just say, how about you do one question and then we'll go around? Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And so my question is for Tyler. Hi, Tyler. The question was, I think it was your second or third slide, and it was the last bullet. And it struck me because I didn't see how it fit in with anything else. So I know, obviously, you had an intent there. So we could go to your second or third slide.
Is that workable, Kathy? Can you pull up the slides very easily? So we can go back to that.
And while we're doing that, I'll ask the other question to Tyler. And that is that we had a cancellation of meetings, right, for the SAC. And from hindsight, would you say that was a mistake, or what can we learn from that if it was a mistake? How should that inform how we proceed based on, losing a year or two?
To have the delay in the process. Yeah. Okay, so Kathy, is it possible to go back up to Tyler's second slide? There we go.
Tyler, you want to take a stab with the second question? Why?
The second question, hindsight, looking back, was it a mistake to put this on hold? I'll let everybody else weigh in whether or not they were in the brain space and the understanding to work on this complex of an issue with public input and dialogue in February or March of 2020. I can tell you, I probably was not. Very focused on the emergency response surrounding the pandemic. And I think from a community dialogue and participation standpoint, it was very important to put this process on hold.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and this is the bullet that I'm referring to. IPRTF will also serve as a law and justice council. I'm not understanding how that fits in with what I don't know what that means. So if you could put that in context for me.
Yeah, I can sure try. I think Councilmember Buchanan can provide some other context as well. There was an existing Law and Justice Council, which is authorized by state law, RCW 7209-300, which was to work on specific law and justice issues. That was a different committee or council other than the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force. And with so much momentum, community input, cooperation at the task force level, it was decided that they would be a good entity to take on those responsibilities as well.
So as a county, we were required to have a law and justice council, And
That's
the way
correct.
the country responded was by making the IPRTF that entity.
Yeah, with that dual role.
And I'm just looked up in parallel. Hopefully you don't consider that disrespect, Holly. I looked up on my other computer. It's RCW 7209-300. Is that it?
Yes, my understanding.
All right, thank you. That's my question for now.
Good job. Thank you, Atul. Okay.
I'll have more when it's
Good. What?
I'll have more if it's appropriate.
Thanks. Again, I'm watching the clock. We'll get as many as we can. I'm going to go. I don't know what it all looks like to you. I've got two screens of you, so I'm just going to go across the top, click my screen, and go across the next. So next person up would be Brel Froby. Go ahead, Brel.
Hi, thank you. Really appreciate all of the work from the presenters and that just an overview of really, really helpful information. I also have tons of questions. One is, so a number of the presenters spoke about just the challenges that COVID has brought and the strain that it's put on the jail and the legal system. And yeah, I guess what came to mind listening to that is that while that might be true, I also wonder, like, I was really struck by the number of like going from 7,000 down to 3,000. And I'm wondering if there's like lessons to be learned from that or things that we can pull from policies that were enacted because of the pandemic that could extend beyond that. So I'm just, I guess, flagging that as something that I'd love to discuss further, because I think that's in some ways could be really seen as like a success to lower those numbers so significantly. So yeah, I guess it's more of a comment, but like one quick question. When we do get the person coming in who's a data person, I would love to know if they have any data or research around the efficacy of compulsory treatment. Would love to hear more about that if possible. Thanks.
Great. So good. And thanks, Brel, for just clarifying. These are, a request. Here's some statement that works great too. So thanks for clarifying. And so next up, Harriet, you're up. And Brel, you can put your hand down. That'll help me. Harriet, your turn.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see a few familiar faces. I'm pretty new in the county, and this is the first endeavor that I've really kind of taken a dive into. And of course, it got upended almost as soon as I got involved. But in the meantime, I'm really impressed with all the work that everybody's done and the way the project has been organized. And a lot of the questions that I had as we were going through have been answered as the conversation went along. Stephen, I totally agree with your idea for that intercept model to have the pre-zero piece of it, because I think that that's a big piece of I assume that's a big piece of what we're going to be talking about in terms of a needs assessment. Obviously, there's things that need to be put in place once somebody's entered the legal system, but it's the pre-stuff, the prevention and early intervention stuff that I think is really going to make a big difference. Question I have is, we have the data for the needs assessment in terms of drug and alcohol services, in terms of mental health services? Do we know how many people are already receiving services, at what agencies, at what level of care, where the gaps are in do we have all that information, or is that what we're going to be researching as part of this project?
I'll take that one.
Yep.
The statement you made last is correct. That's something that's high on the list to ascertain on our deep dive sessions, so that we get a real understanding of that data and how it applies.
Great. Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
I'll just add to Councilmember Buchanan. We do have a little bit of data. We also have some really knowledgeable people. We have Arlene Feld, who is on the North Sound Administrative Services Organization, which is the main repository of what information there might be. We have Perry Mowry, who is an extraordinarily experienced manager in the health department, following the shoes of the legendary Ann Deacon. So we have a lot of data. We haven't integrated a lot of data, and we have a lot of gaps in the data.
Okay, great. Good.
And Arlene, I see you're there. You want to wave so we see you? Great. And Perry, you're there someplace? Yeah. Okay. There you are. Thanks. Okay, so Jack, you're up.
I more wanted to answer a question, but I figured I'd raise my hand. As the co-chair of the task force, I first want to thank everybody for being here, but also for those folks who haven't been so involved. Both Stephen and I and other task force members are available. I may pronounce your name wrong. Is it Atul? I hope I got that right. But if you have questions about the Law and Justice Council and how that happened, I'd be happy to talk to you about that offline. It was something Sheriff Elfo advocated for a long time, as did the previous prosecutor, as well as Prosecutor Ritchie. And it seemed a logical step. But rather than waste this group's time, well, not waste, but we only have so much time. If you have questions like that, Stephen and I are available as a resource. There's a lot of information we have, and I sometimes forget. Not everyone's been listening to all this stuff for years with the same data. So please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to get that for you. Thanks.
And Jack, if they, as the co-chairs of the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force, what's the best way? Is it better to use our group email and just say for Jack, or do you want them to contact you via a different way?
I think if Stephen agrees, if it's for the task force, unless Jill Nixon says something different, just maybe send it to Stephen and I. If it's of a formal nature, maybe copy Jill. I'm just guessing. That could be the wrong approach. That would work. I'm happy to be kind of informal. And if you want to pick up the phone and call me, I'd be happy to get you my number.
Great. Okay. Stephen, does that make sense to you? Because you're both online, right? As the co-chairs, people can view through that.
Yeah, we are. And so the only thing I would add to what Jack said, which I agree with, is that if you think your question might be relevant to our whole advisory committee, you could run it through Kathy, perhaps, as our support person.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking not so much a philosophical or a position, it's just background. But yes, thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with what Stephen says. When in doubt, send it through Kathy, so we make sure that everyone gets a chance to answer that question.
Great. Okay. So when you do send emails, Kathy will be kind of the director and help make sure questions get to the right people too, I suspect. Okay.
And Holly, I would also add, I know we've all done our Open Public Meetings Act training, so you realize that our communications should be run that way, and that they are open to public disclosure as well. So just factor that in the communications.
Great, thanks. And that's actually a good reminder for everybody to make sure you do that training. You've all done it, right? Or you're going to do it soon. So much fun. Okay, who else has a question who hasn't had a chance yet?
Michael Lilliquist has his hand up, but it blends in with this wall because I can just barely see it.
What? Seriously? Where is it? Michael, where are you? I can't even find you now. Okay, Michael, I can't even see your hand, but go ahead.
It's skin colored. I should make it Simpsons yellow, I guess. Barry has said it nice and accurately that the public seems to prefer, and I prefer, treatment over punishment. And I guess we'd add treatment and prevention over punishment. And so I want to know whether or not we can talk about how fully we can talk about capacity in both those elements. During the second failed levy, I know that I worked with Tyler Schroeder, some other people, maybe you, Barry, to put $30 million into that jail levy fund. And I think it was $150 million. So that was 1/5. And I didn't think that was enough, but it was all I could get in there at the time. Are we going to be able to talk about an ultimate funding proposal that may be significantly about funding prevention and treatment programs rather than just about funding the facilities for incarceration?
That is the vision. The vision is to have a much more holistic approach this time, and to take all those things that you're talking about into consideration when we talk about funding.
Great, because I was afraid this would be a jail planning task force, but it sounds broader, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. It reminds me, it kind of resonates with what Harriet brought up early is where's the -0 and the -1 and -2. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Daniel. Sure.
Yeah, thank you. The Behavioral Health Committee of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force is exactly on point with Councilmember Lillquist's request in terms of understanding, and then I think some of their speakers had some requests in terms of understanding treatment options, a survey of what's currently out there. At our last meeting on Tuesday, we discussed methamphetamine, fentanyl, carfentanil, benzodiazepine, other drugs, and what's out there for treatment options, and as well as kind of digging into involuntary treatment, gravely disabled definitions and such. So I would encourage this group to go back, and those are all they're on video. So to go back and take a look at the last Behavioral Health Committee meeting, and if you're able to attend future ones, you're more than welcome to do that as an attendee or watch them at your convenience. I think that would be really fruitful, more background information for y'all.
Great. Thank you, Dan. All right, Executive Sidhu, you're up.
All right, I just wanted to add that is a very good question Michael has asked. The other big factor is the operating cost. Like sometimes we forget about when we do this kind of projects. And this has been brought up since 2015, and I've been studying that quite a bit at that time. $5 to $7 million, I will just give you a round number, a $10 million savings in operating cost a year. As you go further 30 years, it is a very, very huge number. I used to say in the council that we can get free jail if we can save $10 million a year. It pays for itself. So I think that this committee should also look into whatever choices we make, how can we work on the operating cost and reduce that. So don't take my numbers to heart, but I just wanted to illustrate that it is phenomenal number savings in the operating cost when we consider this facility. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Anybody else who hasn't had a chance to speak yet who would like to make a comment at this time or ask a question? Okay, we have just about 3 minutes left, maybe 4, just looking at the clock. So Atul, did you have some more? You said you had several, and then Brel, I see your hand up as well.
Well, there were a lot of great questions and were very helpful. And so a lot of those have been addressed wonderfully. That's the way the process works well. So thanks for facilitating that, Holly. The thing I wanted to briefly ask about is treatment versus incarceration. And I think there's a lot of possibility of treatment post-incarceration. And then treatment pre-incarceration, which is the phase -1, phase -2 stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that I want to understand is how much are we going to emphasize the treatment on pre-incarceration, and how much ability do we have to, so to me, there's 2 things that come out of a needs assessment. If it's a community needs assessment, community needs assessment is not driven by the facilities and the current maintainers of facilities. Community needs assessment should be driven by the community. And so when that approach is taken, there's no preference for what happens before facilities or after people are put into facilities. So I'd like to suggest that maybe just as much emphasis is placed on pre-facilities services. And to address the executive's point about operating costs, there's nothing that more dramatically affects operating costs by not needing to run facilities in the first place. So the more that we can do before we utilize government-owned facilities, the more we're going to save not just the corporation of the county, but the more we're going to save the actual residents of the community, whose pocketbooks also matter tremendously. So I would I would like to just, as a comment, and say that I don't know how much, but I would certainly like to see this community needs assessment be driven by all the things that are not related to facilities, just as much as things that are related to facilities.
Thank you. Bro.
Thanks. One question that I have about the process of the needs assessment, and I love how you framed it, a tool as a community needs assessment, is I guess a question about like at what point, and like one thing that I'm really interested in is doing a needs assessment of like really doing good outreach to talk to folks that are formerly incarcerated or maybe even currently incarcerated. I'm wondering if that is part of the plan, and is that something that we're going to be doing as SAC members, or if that is going to be part of the needs assessment, and who's going to be taking that on, or if there's been any thought about how to get the knowledge and wisdom of folks that are most affected by these systems to get their input on the needs assessment.
Great question. Is anyone able to pick that one up?
Holly, I had kind of a hard time hearing it because something's rattling around. So I was missing like every.
I'll restate it. Yeah, it's hey bro, when you just making sure you hold your phone really still. I think you're on a iPhone, so next time hold it really still, or for anybody if you happen to be in that situation. So the question was about is there a way in which that we are able to make sure we've got input from the people who are experiencing or have experienced incarceration into our process? That was
the answer is yes. I know we have members on this group that are lived experience, and we are always seeking that in our, in the way we study this. We have to know what people have gone through. We have Mr. Goldman, who represents some of the services in the jail as far as workforce training and things. He's got a lot of experience with dealing with folks. So the answer is yes, that's super important, and we're going to make sure that we take that into account.
Great. So Harriet, I see your hand and saw Paul, but I'm actually going to jump over because we have a couple of people who haven't spoken yet and prioritize their opportunity. So David, do you want to speak? Did you have a thought there?
I actually had a quick question. I noticed that we're emphasizing lots of wonderful diversion programs, including mental health, totally support it, as well as treatment, totally support it. One major diversion program that we also have in the county currently that I hope that we'll emphasize is education, as well as career development, both of which I guess I'm seeing directly as really wonderful opportunities and lots of resources in the county that are currently happening. So when we do our line items on diversion programs, I hope education and career development can go in there.
Thank you so much. Chief Jones, did you have something, or your hand was up and now it's down and you're on mute?
I was just going to say we can certainly arrange, I would say we could send paper surveys out to the offender population, and we can do that in multiple languages. Part of the issue is that about a little over half of my population is functionally illiterate. So the other option may be, and it may be something that this committee can put forward, is if there was a college student that wanted an internship, that have them go around and be able to ask the offenders, it would be totally anonymous. So you might get back some really interesting questions, but especially if you were interested in what folks who are currently incarcerated have opinions about, I'm sure that they have them, and it may be something that the committee could look at and that we can facilitate. So
great, thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, I've seen we're coming close to the end of our time. So for those folks who had more comments, or if they come to you later, go ahead and email those over. I really appreciated hearing just the thinking about the kind of scope of the assessment. Really appreciated those thoughts. And we're going to need to shift gears to the very last part because we have some coordination we need to take care of. So again, thank you. That super excellent questions and insights into our process. Okay, here are the things we have to do to wind up. We need to elect the SAC chair, which is largely a perfunctory moment, but we do need to do that today. And I'll close up with just doing a review again of the anticipated meeting schedule and the plan for this committees and the in-between meeting outreach. So first, we're going to do the election of the SAC chair. So in hindsight, I should have made you all a slide, but I'm going to just describe to you how it's going to work. So Kathy, you can take that down. So first of all, I'm going to ask for anybody from the planning group, if you could just say briefly, what the chair is, and then I'm going to ask for nominations. So we'll take any nominations, then we'll have a second. Any other nominations? So for any seconds, if we only have one nomination, we'll just do, an assent by aye and do it that way. If we have several people who are nominated with seconds, then we'll do a roll call vote. Okay, so I think I've thought this one through. I think we can do this. Yeah, so that's what we've got right now to do. Yeah, Jack, please.
You wanted somebody from the planning group. So my understanding from Stephen, Barry, and the rest of us that we're doing that is, while it is perfunctory, we at times may need a chair. There could be requests for someone to represent this group. Also, there have to be a liaison with the county council, and there could be times that a chair is necessary. And in the planning group, both Stephen and I, and I'm going to make this nomination in addition to describing the role, thought the easiest and most logical fit was to nominate Barry because he could fill in with both very easily and understands that role. So in addition to explaining it, I'm also nominating Barry Buchanan to be the chair of the SAC.
I second that.
Okay, who just seconded?
Satpal.
Okay, Satpal, thank you. Hey, Harriet, your hand's up. And so I don't know if that's for this process or from the before. Got it. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other nominations for the chair role?
Could you put up the list of the planning group members?
Yeah, I think, Kathy, I think that, did we have that in this PowerPoint? We had that slide. I remember seeing it. Kathy, I think it was back on like the second or third slide, maybe. Or if you had that, yeah, there we go. Okay, so any other nominations? All righty, then I'm going to go ahead and did I miss everything? Good. So it's been motioned, moved and seconded to have Barry serve as the chair of the SAC. Any further discussion? Hearing none, can you give your assent by saying aye?
Aye.
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 Great.
Aye.
Wonderful. And then any opposed? And any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Okay. Good. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate that. Hey, we just did our first vote. And we had vote, worked. Online meetings, man. Gotta love them. Alrighty, we have one more thing to do.
And I just want to thank the committee for that vote. I appreciate your vote of confidence, and I look forward to serving and being able to be that liaison to the council and keep us moving forward. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Barry. I appreciate it. You work hard for this thing. We appreciate you. All right, Kathy, if you could pop up that last slide. We're on the home stretch here. And boy, as Kathy does that, I just want to thank, this was so much paying attention. So thank you, everybody, for just all go up one. Yep. Okay, so meeting schedule and clarify this kind of homework stuff we need to do. Okay, pop down. So I mentioned this, we went through this early on, but basically this time between now and early April, just do everything you can to get your training done for Open Public Meetings Act, and also to just familiarize yourself with all of this content. There's a lot there, and the better informed people are, the better our conversations are going to be. What's going to happen then is that people who are bringing forward the data from the criminal justice data and the behavioral health services, we wanted to give them enough time to really get all that stuff together, and also to look at some of those gaps. This came up earlier in our call, is that there's actually some gaps we need to figure out how to get as much information as we can to work with, and including some of the points that were made today by the participants, all of you, of things we might want to look at or include. So then this last part on step 4 is facilities et al. We'll have to again shape that a little bit, and then the preliminary summary of the needs assessment. So we'll see how that all goes. But in concept, imagine that after April, it could be every month or two, and we'll just see how that goes for the flow and what we need to do. Okay, next slide. So homework, here's your homework. In addition to familiarizing yourselves with the information, we're going to send out a participant survey by the end of this month. And that is going to be a really important part for both, so that you can get to know each other better and understand each other's roles, and you can understand more of what each other cares about. And that also is going to help us start thinking about these subcommittees. So we have the things that we know need to go into the needs assessment, and what our hope is to also line that up with things that people have passion and knowledge about. So really, really appreciate you filling out your participant survey. Second thing is to identify 3 to 5 people from your respective communities or agencies that you represent, who you can talk to between each SAC meeting. And this is not the only way we're going to get public input, but it's a really important way, because it's those one-on-one conversations that they're really going to help you kind of expand your thinking, and to also bring questions back. So if you think about, and I really do want to encourage you to think about this, like think about people who you feel like would really challenge your thinking, challenge the thinking of the group, so and lean into a diversity of perspectives. Okay, so, and agency people, I've done some of this kind of stuff before. You tend to wuss out, don't wuss out on me. We want to get your 3 to 5 people. Okay, it's really important. All right, and then last but not least, this finding people to fill the vacancies on the SAC. So we did have some attrition during that gap. And I think Kathy said we did have 1 more applicant. So it's really, we're only missing 1 person. But if you know of somebody who you think would be a good addition to our team, if you could reach out to them, please, and encourage them to apply, that would be fabulous. All right. The meeting materials from today, there's tons of background information that was already sent to you, and just stuff that we'll collect as we go along. Make sure you get this written down. That's our website. That's our place that we really hold all this information. And then again, the email, if you have more thoughts after this meeting, and that includes everybody who's on the SAC, but also people who are attendees here today, who just, if you've got stuff, like I'm seeing there's a hand up from David. David, go ahead and like send it to that email. Okay, so we can hear your thoughts. If you have input or questions, send them to that email, and Kathy will help us sort that through. So I think, let me see if there's anything else that I've forgotten. I think that's the main stuff. Team is there. Marty, Stephen or Jack or Barry, is there anything I've forgotten before we wind up?
Okay. No, I think you nailed it, Holly.
Okay,
I said we got a few more wrap-up questions.
Yeah, okay. Let's just take,
Holly,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would just say, we will try to get out a specific meeting date for that meeting number 2 as soon as possible. We're working with Dr. Harris from UW and her schedule, as well as our needs, but we'll try to give you absolutely as much notice as possible, so we don't have people with scheduling conflicts down the road.
Great, Thanks. And Arlene, you had one more point you'd like to make?
Yes, it's a scheduling question, and this has to do with any kind of public hearings that we're going to be having. I understand that we're going to, but it wasn't discussed today. The sooner we can get that schedule out, the better, because people sometimes have to take time off to participate in these things. And we're asking for a lot of feedback from the community, from the citizens. So let's let them know when they'll be able to speak.
Great, thanks. Great point. Okay, everybody, we need to wind it up. It's just 2 minutes after the hour. This has been a great session. Thank you again to all of our presenters and to everybody who's been working on these issues in all the different ways to make our community healthier and safer and just a better place to live and care for each other. So thank you all, and we'll see you in April.
And thank you, Holly, for doing such a great job of getting us through this. I know Executive Sadhu had his hand up. I just wanted to give him a chance, but he might have left. Okay.
Okay.
All right, everybody. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.